Hey folks, and a very warm welcome back to the JLX podcast with me, Xander, as always. How you doing? I hope you are good. I hope you've had a good week. So this podcast is going to start in a slightly different way to a normal podcast. However, it does have equal amounts of fantastic information. But I did make a promise to my team on Saturday. So on Saturday, we had our first Team JLX meetup of the year. It was an absolute banger. It was honestly better than I could have imagined, and I think from a personal perspective, I was actually able to enjoy this year so much more. I know that last year I was very, very nervous. I was very nervous about people getting there safely, people getting home safely, the event going smoothly, that I probably didn't enjoy it half as much as I could have done because I spent too much time worrying. And rightly so. You know, I care a lot about my team. Of course I do. And I think, obviously, you hear lots of horror stories. So I think from my perspective, knowing that last year went so well, I was so much more prepared to enjoy this year, so much more prepared to be able to kind of relax a little bit into it, knowing that, you know, people could get there safely and all was going well. So it was a much better event from my side of things. And also because the team had met last year, there were so many reunions going on, and generally with the chat that we have in our community, I think with the masterclasses that we put on every other week, people had met each other more, people had seen more of each other, so naturally there was a lot more community, there was a lot more cohesion, and generally I just think the vibe was wonderful. It couldn't have been better in my opinion. So obviously I'll be biased, I was the one who put on the event, but the feedback the ladies have given has been fantastic too. So anyway, I did make a promise because on the way to the event, Sarah, one of my clients, we travelled together, and we were going to do a bit of a carpool karaoke, but as it happened, the weather was questionable, the traffic was quite intense, so we decided it was better to just stick our heads down, get the drive done and head on through. However, one of the questions that one of the team had asked was about something I had put on my Instagram years ago and have never really spoken about. So I made the promise that the next time I did a podcast, I would talk about it. Now, you'll have guessed from the title of this podcast kind of how this works out, but I will give you the tea on it. So this podcast is going to be about pre-workout nutrition and how we manage that, because I think this is something which is typically very much underappreciated and also confusing. I don't know that many people really know exactly how to do it or what they're doing. We're also going to be talking about pre-workouts in this as well, which takes me perfectly to my story. A few years ago, I posted on Instagram 10 interesting facts about me. And one of those interesting facts was that whilst trying to make my own pre-workout, I managed to put myself in the hospital. Now, I sit here today with this being funny, and it is, in hindsight, something that was rather funny. However, at the time, it was not funny, and I actually thought I was going to die. So I will tell you exactly what happened. When I was at university, as a typical university student, you're always trying to look for ways to save a little bit of money, right? And I remember at the time I was taking my pre by my protein, which was a really good pre-workout. And to be honest, I still have some of it downstairs, not the same tub, but some of that pre-workout. And anyway, a colleague of mine, Niall, so if Niall is listening to this, I am fully blaming you for what happens next. A colleague of mine, Niall, said, look, I don't know what's the point, why you're buying that, because, you know, it's a pre-made pre-workout, which is a blended mix, so the only things you really need in it, you could just make, and therefore you could make this pre-workout so much cheaper. And of course, being very much into my science and being very much, I was in my university degree at the time, I thought, he actually makes a great point. If I take the active ingredients, if I take the caffeine, if I take the beta-alanine, the citrulline malate, etc., and I make a pre-workout, in fact, what I'm doing is, instead of having this proprietary blend of all this shit that you don't really know, I mean, there's arguably nothing untoward about those ingredients, but you know when they make like My Protein Max and it's just like a C next to it, you have no idea what that even means, because it's just going to be a concoction of random things. And obviously they've patented it, so they're not going to tell you what it is, and they don't have to either. But the active ingredients you're looking at, like I said already, are creatine, citrulline malate, beta-alanine, and of course caffeine. They're the things that really matter. So Niall said, I'm just making my own. Buy yourself some scales, buy yourself all these ingredients. And I was like, right. So I went on My Protein and I had a look. And I can't remember the exact cost of it, but let's just say for the cost I could have bought my pre with, I could make the equivalent batch, and it would honestly, it was like a tenth of the price. So I was like completely sold on it. So I was like, right, that's what I'll do. So what I did is I made my own version of a pre-workout, mixed it up the lot, and I kept an actual tub of my protein, my pre, just for the good days. So like when I was maxing out, I thought I'd treat myself to the good stuff, you know. So anyway, on a normal day, I'd make my own pre-workout. It would have 200 milligrams of caffeine. It would have the right doses of beta-alanine, citrulline malate, etc. Perfect. And I think if I remember correctly, I can't remember if it was my citrulline malate or one of them had the flavouring. So it was nice. Like, it was a tasty pre-workout that I made. Anyway, one time I got a bit annoyed because I just kept having to make it before my workout. So I said, right, I'm going to make it as a little batch. And I knew that if I had X amount of this, I would have the right amount. So anyway, this was all going swimmingly until one day it was max out day. I just come off the back of a heavy squat cycle, and I was looking to max out my back squat. I was weightlifting at the time, it's worth mentioning that. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to treat myself today. I knew I was going to go up in the caffeine ranks anyway. I knew the case was that I was going to push the caffeine. So I had 2 full scoops of my pre, as in my protein pre. Now, that would have contained, I think at the time, like 450 milligrams of caffeine, like my upper level. So if you look at the studies into caffeine, people should be consuming, in optimal senses, around 6 milligrams per kilo of body weight. So in total, I think I was weighing about 85 at the time. So what would that be? 6 8, 48. Yeah, it'd be about 550. So I was pretty much bang on with my assumptions of what it should be. For reference, when I made my own pre-workout, I needed a 1/4 scoop. So a 1/4 scoop was enough for my 200 milligrams of caffeine. Now, I take my 2 scoops, and actually, no, I think it was 3. I'm trying to work this out because I know the maths. So I think it was 3. I think I went up a limit. So I went like 550. I went 550. Anyway, so I go to the gym. And I start lifting, and I'm like, oh, this feels a bit weird. I felt a bit lightheaded, and I was getting a little bit jittery, and I did my lift, and I'd hit the lift I went in to hit as my program would have produced. And I just felt a bit odd, just felt a bit weird. Anyway, I went home, as I normally would, and I was a student at the time, like I said, so I think it was the middle of summer, because it was just me that was there, and this kind of comes into the fright of the situation. And I just sat there on the sofa for a second, and then my heart just kind of went, it was like the biggest heartbeat I've ever had. And I was like, that's odd. It doesn't feel too good. And I thought, then I started feeling a bit unwell. I started feeling a little bit sick, and I was like, then the anxiety kicked in. Then I started feeling really anxious, like level panic attack. It's kind of anxious. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what's going on here. And then my arm started hurting. At this point, I'm thinking, oh God, like something really bad is happening. And so I started panicking. I thought, right, look, everything is fine. I'm fine. I'm just making something that's nothing. And essentially, I just need to relax, because the more I panic, the bigger issue this is going to become. Lo and behold, at this point, it is getting a lot worse. Okay, it's getting a lot worse. And I go into the shower. So I thought, right, I'll turn the shower on, I'll try and have a cold shower. Now, at the time, my wife now, she was my girlfriend at the time. We'd been together for a few months at the time, to be fair. It wasn't like brand new, but she must have been thinking this guy's a nutter, because she was on holiday at the time, and I'm like, I'm not sure what I've done, but I am really not very well. And I'm messaging her at the time, like, I'm panicking, I need help. I'm sat in the shower, right? So I take all my clothes off because I'm panicking, I'm getting hot. I'm just going to get all these clothes off me. I sit in the shower, trying to give myself a cold shower, like full-blown panicking at this stage. And I thought, oh, this is just getting worse and worse and worse. And I got to such a state Where I lived in Exeter at the time, there was there was a hospital just up the road. So for any of you who are Exeter bound, you'll know by the Waitrose there's a not an emergency department, just a hospital. So I just ran. I just thought, right, I'm going to take myself to hospital. So I ran to a place that doesn't have A&E, and I knew full well it doesn't have an A&E because I'd lived there for so long. Anyway, so then I had to run back. I had to get in the car. I'm pretty sure I ran a couple of red lights on the way to the hospital because I actually thought at this point I was having a heart attack. So I'd managed to convince myself in all my panic and anxiety that I was dying. I don't know why this is. It's funny now because I look back and I know what happened, but it really wasn't funny at the time. I then get to the hospital. There's no parking spaces, so I abandon my car in the police parking bay, which, by the way, I only realised afterwards. I actually didn't realise that at the start. I just saw a space and parked in it. It just so happened to be right next to the door to A&E. And then I go into A&E and I say to the people, like, I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, I'm having a really bad time here. I'm not sure. I have no idea what's happened, but I'm panicking. And anyway, they see me pretty quickly, obviously, and they do like all my vitals, so like my blood pressure and things like that. And all of them are like very, very high. The lady was like, oh, these are fine. But I'm thinking like my blood pressure was like 160 over 120. And obviously I'd been panicking. So I think she was thinking, you know, based on how much you're panicking, these are okay. But I know for a fact at the time I was in pretty healthy shape. So for me, like I was a 120 over 80 kind of guy. I was very, very, very good with my blood pressure. But anyway, they kept me in for a while and they were doing these quizzes. And I said, I just had some pre-workout. That's it. I had some pre-workout. I went to the gym. I have no idea. I have this pre-workout all the time. I've got literally no idea what's going on. My heart feels horrible, and all of this. So long and the short of it, I get back in the car. After about 2 hours, I've calmed down. They've monitored me and they said, look, there's nothing we can see that's a real problem here. You can go home. So I said, okay, I did feel a bit calmer at this point as well. Anyway, as I get in my car, I'm like relaxing. And as I reverse, I just see this little pot of pre-workout roll out from underneath my passenger side seat. And then literally in that moment, everything just came to me. And what I'd realised I had done in that moment was instead of triple scooping a pre-workout to get the right amount of caffeine, I'd actually triple scooped my pre-workout, which I made. So when I actually did the maths on this, it worked out to be just over 1 gram of caffeine that I had taken in this dose of pre-workout. Hence why I felt absolutely atrocious. And do you know what? When I did that, there was part of me that was like, thank God. Because I think I was still convinced at this point I was having a heart attack. So to be honest, I was absolutely like beside myself because one, I was obviously thinking I'd had a heart attack. But two, in that moment when I saw it, I just realised what I'd done and thought, oh shit, like I really had fucked this up. So I get home and I thought, right, I was so exhausted from all the panicking and the panic attack and things, I actually kind of fell asleep. So I fell asleep for about 45 minutes, and then I'm not joking, I did not fall asleep then till the following night. So I literally stayed up all night. I think I'd watched all 3 Lord of the Rings, I'd watched a couple of Star Wars. I was just thinking, I'll watch some films I've seen so many times it will bore me to sleep. It was honestly like between, obviously when I took it, it must have been a good like 36 hours before I had any sleep at all. So that is the story of me making my own pre-workout, it going horribly, and my advice to you in not doing that is don't do it. And my second piece of advice to you would be make sure you follow the instructions on the pre-workout tub. Do not think you're too clever in trying to overdose because it does not work, and you should just follow the instructions. So yeah, to everyone who wanted to hear that story, I hope you enjoyed it. There is actually a helpful element to this podcast other than me just talking about going to hospital. And that is the use of pre-workouts. So I do have some advice on how to use pre-workouts. Now you're probably thinking, why would I take advice from a guy who put himself in hospital? Well, this was nearly 10 years ago, so do give me a break. Actually, it wasn't quite 10 years ago. I was like 20. So actually, yeah, shit, that's nearly 10 years ago. Fuck. Nuts. So yeah, I've learned a lot since then. I've matured and I've grown up. So you'll be pleased to know you can trust me. Well, at least, in many respects. So when it comes to pre-workout, this is what I'd recommend doing. And I don't think it's a good idea to take pre-workout in every session because caffeine fundamentally is an aid, right? But if you keep taking it, it doesn't become an aid anymore so much as it becomes a dependent, right? So if, for example, you think to yourself, I can't be bothered to swim today, I'll wear armbands. You wear armbands so much you don't need to swim anymore, and then you forget how to swim. All of a sudden, these armbands aren't helping you. They are literally the thing that holds you up. So a bit like with that with caffeine, and it's the same like that with your kind of dietary intake as well, coffee and things like that. So what I would recommend doing is if you run a 6-week training program. So we run 6-week training programs typically as a base. Some of our clients do all sorts of different ones, but base level would be 6. The 6th week is a deload. You do not need caffeine in a deload week. If you do, there's something seriously wrong. You do not need caffeine to go to the gym in a deload week. So if we take deload week as the first week, it's not, I understand it's the last week, but that's a no. Week 1, again, you should have absolutely no need to have pre-workout in week 1. And you could be sitting behind this in your earphones and thinking, well, hang on a minute, mate. I've got to get up early. But if you do, it's not going to have the impact it will need to have later on in the block. So don't take pre-workout in week 1. I'm going to say as well, don't even bother taking pre-workout in week 2. You don't need to. Now, if you're basing your highest dose of pre-workout on 1 scoop, so let's say the dose is 1 scoop. Some of them are 2, but let's say it's 1. In week 3, I would then quarter scoop. So I would have a quarter scoop of pre-workout. Now, the reason I would do that is the training is getting heavier, the volume is increasing, and at this stage, you're wanting a little bit of a pickup, a little bit of a boost as we're starting to go a little bit harder into our training block. Week 4, this is the stage I would now be going half scoop to 3/4, depends. Leg sessions, I'd probably go 3/4, and for my upper body sessions, I'd probably go half, typically because leg sessions need a little bit more oomph than, say, upper body sessions. And then in week 5, which is the week we're going to go balls to the wall, all out to failure, that is the week that I would be full scooping, because that's the peak, right? That's where I want to give absolutely everything. And obviously with caffeine being an aid, it's going to help me to do that. So that's how I would gradually overload with caffeine, basically, or periodize it if you like. Sounds a bit, well, it is technically periodization of caffeine through a block, so it does work. But that's what I would do. Now, personally, my theories and opinions and thoughts on caffeine has changed a lot over the years. I actually prefer to train without it nowadays, purely because I like to have it for my work afterwards. So I train early in the morning. I like to get up and go. And then usually what happens is I feel much better for being in the gym. I feel more energized. I feel great when I leave. Then I'll usually have a coffee around mid-morning to push me through and give me a bit for my work. But not having it before training, I think is great, because then you get the buzz of training anyway. So from my personal perspective, I think if you can, don't. There's no need. Once you've started, it's hard to get off it. Because again, it becomes a reliance, comes to dependence. The thing that matters the absolute most for pre-workouts is nutrition, is hydration, and is sleep. If you want the best pre-workout in the world, get yourself a nice 8 to 10 hours or 7 to 10 hours sleep. I say 8 over to 7 because I think everybody goes, 7's fine. Most people need 8. There's such a small percentage of people who need less than 8 hours sleep. 7 to 9 is like the thing, but typically humans will do better on 8 hours. So if you get yourself 8 hours sleep, you're well hydrated, you've got a really nice high carb, easily digestible pre-workout meal, that is, you're going to train so much better than somebody who does all of those things mediocre and has a pre-workout. Why? Because fundamentally your body's not going to perform as well if it's fatigued and tired. It's not going to perform very well if it's underfueled, and it's certainly not going to perform very well if you then ram it full of caffeine when you've got no fuel behind that. So recovery is a big thing, and obviously hydration is, I don't need to explain to you how important hydration is. So if you ask me which I would prefer, sleep, carbohydrates, good as in like a good meal, sleep, easily digestible carbohydrates, and hydration, or mediocre of those with caffeine, I take the optimal every time, because it's going to be so much better for you. So instead of worrying about what pre-workout you need in order to facilitate a better training session, what you should be doing is worrying about the sleep, the recovery, the hydration, and obviously a really good pre-workout meal. If you do that, your training is not going to be more enjoyable, your recovery will be so much better, and the progressions that you make will be, honestly, if you had to ask me for a percentage, I would say 25 to 40% better than if you neglect those three things and just focus on a pre-workout. I think that many people focus on a pre-workout over the other things because they feel like they're doing all they can there, but it's just not true. It's just not true. So many of us could do so much better in those areas. The pre-workout's a quick fix, so naturally as human beings, we'll take that over. How do I go to bed a bit earlier? How do I get off Netflix? How do I get off my phone? How do I do less of the obsessive thing I do before bed that prevents me from going to sleep and more of the sleeping thing that would help me train? And I don't sit here, by the way, holier than thou. I struggle with these things too. Once I get into something, I really struggle to put it down. So I'm not saying that I don't. I'm just talking about the optimal things that we can be doing that are going to help us to get better workouts, better recovery, and less reliant on things like caffeine as an external stimulant to enable us to at least have a mediocre session. We want to be having great sessions, and therefore we want to be in control of all the elements of that as much as we can. That is all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed the little snippet at the end in terms of the help regarding workout, nutrition and things like that. If you've got any questions, as always, please let me know. If you enjoyed the story and you want to hear some others, give me a shout. I'm always a fan of a story, so I'm happy to share. Other than that, have a wonderful day. Take good care.